This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and we have been covering the cultural contributions of working class art and media. And one of the most important is in San Francisco with the San Francisco Mime Troupe. And joining us today is Michael Sullivan. They've just released a new play, performing it at Dolores Park in San Francisco. And I think it's important that working people hear about this and see it if they have the chance. And join us is Michael. So welcome, Michael. And why don't you talk about the Mime Troupe and then we'll get into your new production.
Well, the Mime Troupe, for those people who don't know, we don't do silent mime. We're a theater of working class analysis of all of the different issues that present our culture in general, United States in particular. Uh, we're a by the working class, for the working class, of the working class theater company, collectively run. And when you think about our shows, what I tell people is it's just like seeing a Broadway musical, only it's small and it has a point. Um, we deal with the issues of the day, so our shows are very timely, and we tour around. Steve said we opened the show in Dolores Park in San Francisco, but we will be playing, through Northern California, the East Bay, mid-state, doing. And most of our shows are free to see because we want to make sure to do our shows at a price the working class can't afford. Free. But we do have some indoor shows where people can actually sit in seats. Most of our shows are done in parks. And the company is 66 years old now. We have a Tony Award, Nobi Award, a bunch of other awards. And strangely enough, we're not in jail yet. Oh, and we don't take corporate sponsorship because you can't critique capitalism if you keep taking money from the capitalists.
And the Mime Troupe, of course, developed in the 60s when there was a mass movement in this country uh, for human rights against war in Vietnam. I mean, there were many movements. And today we face in my view, a fascist government, raids ICE, a Project 2025 agenda, which is a fascist agenda to destroy
Hmm.
public worker unions, privatize, and basically away, get rid of all democratic rights. So your new production, of course, deals with that. But the whole period that we're in, do you find it shocking that United States at this point has a fascist government?
I wish I could say it was shocking. I mean, one of the things that the Mime Troupe said, one of the reviews was like, the Mime Troupe should just name our show, We Told You So. Um, we've been talking about creeping fascism in the cycle of governments, in the cycle of economics, how capitalism failed decades ago. It failed in the Depression, really. It failed at the Great Crash. Uh, and has been propped up with these different things ever since, different government programs that are essentially socialist programs to try to keep capitalism going. And I feel like the capitalists started feeling like, no, this really works, actually, you know, knowing that forgetting that they were resting on public wealth, resting on democracy and a democratic republic. They're resting on all of this and just becoming more and more selfish, more and more a commitment to profit first. So what we're seeing now, in my opinion, is, as they said, Mussolini almost called fascism corporatism. Um, the idea that what we have are people. I was talking to somebody yesterday about this commitment of, well, business is so wonderful that what we need is to run our governments like a business. If only we get business people in there, without understanding that capitalism is antithetical to democracy, and government is a not for profit service organization. And when you put corporate people in charge of a not for profit organization, they don't understand it. They're looking for profit. And in my opinion, our current uh, president like object is not thinking of becoming a dictator. He's thinking of being a CEO. CEOs only have to answer to the board that they picked. So he doesn't understand government on a fundamental level as a service organization. And he has surrounded himself with other people who see it as a corporation. And and it really should be this great example of how bad capitalism is when you put pure capitalists in charge and they ruin everything. because they don't see us. At best, we're customers if we have the money. And if we don't have the money to be customers, we should just be outside the store. We can't afford anything. Get out, die. And on top of that, there's the raging racism, the horrifying sexism, the neo-Confederate quality, you know, all of that bound together in a government that is neither of, by, or for the people in any way whatsoever. And all I had to do was write a comedy about that.
And of course, they don't want to talk about the Civil War. That may hurt feelings. The
Right.
idea that they're going to reshape, they want to attack ethnic studies, get rid of that. And your play, and we can talk about that. You talks about what's going on in San Francisco. You have a billionaire mayor that previously ran a nonprofit, and one of
Hmm.
its proposals to solve the budget crisis with this in a city with over 80 billionaires is to do a tax on cars going into, in Golden Gate Park.
Yeah. I mean, the idea and the thing with even with our current mayor, and it's like, oh yeah, he ran a nonprofit. People forget he inherited a bunch of money. You know, this idea that multimillionaires can solve our problems. He doesn't have a history of real public service. He inherited hundreds of millions of dollars. And he turned around and started appointing people from Silicon Valley whose primary skill was raising money. And from my perspective, I don't know Mr. Lurie, so I don't know if he's a sexist or racist or anything else. All I know is he, like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, hasn't had to work for anybody. He hasn't had to take an order. He hasn't had to have his work reviewed. And so, on the one hand, we've got somebody who has never had to really work their way up to do anything, can just buy things, appointing Silicon Valley sociopaths to be in charge of the public good. There's a lot of similarity between what that happening in San Francisco, and there are a lot of people here who will say, "Well, I hate Trump and Musk," oh, but they love these people, and it's like, but they're not as bad, I don't think, but they're on the same path. We need actual public servants.
And the whole issue in your play talks about gentrification. The working class in San Francisco, a lot of them have been driven out. Artists have been driven out, building these condos, $1 million condos, and
Yeah,
skyscrapers, which are now empty with an occupation rate of 30%. It seems like there's no housing for working class, and we're spending millions to chase people off the streets, to arrest people who are homeless, who are living in
yeah.
RV vehicles.
And chasing the RVs out of areas. And it's like I mean, it started really like back in the 80s when uh, Dianne Feinstein wanted to make San Francisco the financial capital of the Pacific Rim. And so she gave all these huge tax cuts to, Bank of America and Wells Fargo and all of these companies to put their headquarters here. It didn't work. They moved to Shanghai or they moved anywhere else in the country. And so we had this tradition of giving these tax breaks to anybody who says they'll build something in San Francisco. And the pattern normally goes about the same. They say, we will build luxury condominiums, but we'll balance that out by building affordable housing. But we'll build the luxury stuff first. They build that, and then they always say, oops, we ran out of money before they get to the affordable housing. Or like with Newsom's new bill, which is, as I understand it, if you're building affordable housing, you have a lot of environmental regulations, and and you're using union workers. But if you're building luxury condos, you're exempt from those. And they say, oh, you don't have to use union workers. First of all, you should always have to use union workers. That isn't an option. But they're giving the luxury housing market a pass and saying, well, this is all about creating new housing. There's plenty of housing in San Francisco. It's underutilized. There are all of these useless buildings that they built for corporations that are standing empty that should be converted. It's always trickle down. Every time somebody comes up with a plan, and tries to enact a plan for housing or to help local organizations and businesses and nonprofits, there's always this part that says, first, we're going to help the ruling class. Don't worry, we'll get to you. But first, we're going to make sure corporations have nice, shiny headquarters. First, we're going to make sure that there are luxury condominiums. First, we're going to do all this. Then eventually that will take pressure off of the housing market or something. And it's like, no, that just means that the ultra rich will own two houses. That just means that you'll build these condos downtown and say, oh, well, don't worry, rich people will move into those condos and that will open up housing. No, those rich condos will be owned by people who don't even live here. They will be second vacation homes for people from Seattle, from Washington, from Denver, from DC, from New York. There's no law that says you have to live here to own them. So a lot of those buildings are empty, not because the property isn't owned, but because the people don't live there. Having some regulation about local ownership would help much more than just building more luxury sky high houses.
And the issue of deregulation, of course, we have a government now and a bill that was passed that would deregulate the economy, allow
Yep.
cryptocurrency speculation, unbridled speculation, backing up the US currency with cryptocurrency. It sounds like a good idea, doesn't it?
Oh, goodness. And the thing is, it's like just a few years ago, so many of the people who are now all so pro crypto, they absolutely understood it as a Ponzi scheme. You know, even Trump was like, this is a Ponzi scheme. It is just a Ponzi scheme. It is nothing but a scam. Crypto is nothing but a scam. And the people who are in it know that, and they will tell you up front, you're going to give me money to buy these things, and then when it's a greater fool scam, just like Wall Street in general, but it's a greater fool scam. You just buy something cheap, and then when you think it's going to go down, you sell it to somebody you think is a little stupider than you. They think it's going to go up and you think it's going to go down. You're trying to find a greater fool. They think you're the fool. You think they're the fool. It is just a scam. And unfortunately, it's one of, insider trading. The rich get richer, poor people, working class people, just regular folks think, oh, well, this is a chance for me to get rich. It's more secure than the lottery. It's worse than the lottery. The lottery's bad enough. This is worse than the lottery. Why don't you just walk up to rich people on the street and give them your money and hope that maybe at some point they'll give you some? That's all it is. And now we are going to base our entire financial system openly on a Ponzi scheme. That is how ridiculously desperate the aristocracy and oligarchs in this country are. They are so desperate to just not pay their damn taxes, to just restructure the system as a nonprofit rather than a for profit. They will do anything. They would skin your children. It's like the Swiftian modest proposal. They will do anything rather than give up a modicum of wealth and a small percentage of power.
And
Comedy, like I said, that's
Francisco
why I
has
write musical comedies.
San Francisco has the massive wealth, all these billions of dollars coming in, open AI, the AI people, and the mayor has put them
Oh,
in charge of reviving San Francisco. Where is the
yeah.
money? Where is
Well,
the
the thing
money?
is, and even the thing with AI, we all use it. I understand. Everybody uses AI. Every time I'm typing something on my computer and it's auto finishing my sentence, that's AI. If I'm doing a web search, that's AI. Fine. But AI ended up is a bubble. And you drive into San Francisco from the East Bay and you see sign after sign about all of these AI companies. It is just a bubble. If you can, it's not about making a better mousetrap. It's about making a fancy looking mousetrap and then getting investors to give you money for the right to sell your fancy mousetrap. That's all it is. Your people are making things not to benefit the public. They're making things to raise money. If I can say I've got a new AI company, chicken sprout, AI.com or whatever, I can convince people with money who don't know anything about tech to give me their money to invest in my company. I can live for years off of that. I never even have to come up with a product. So that's why when So trying to make San Francisco focused on a bubble. It's just like, national economy and Ponzi. We're trying to make like we're going to be the home of AI, but it's a bubble. So when DeepSeek came out, the Chinese AI got released, and they made it for like $10 million.
And
Suddenly, all
free,
the
no charges, no charges.
yeah, and then it's free. So then all of these AI companies here freaked out because they're like, we've been lying to our investors for a decade, telling them we needed hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. They didn't. They've just been lying to raise money, not to create a product. Their job is raising money. Those are the people we have put in charge of revitalizing San Francisco. And you don't want con people to be in charge of that. It doesn't matter if they're brilliant, wonderful, and they love puppies. They haven't made anything that we all benefit from. We would rather, it would be so much better to look at the civil servants that we have, find the ones who actually do things, and promote them, rather than going to Silicon Valley and finding whoever has lied most successfully. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that they would have hired Elizabeth Holmes if she wasn't in prison. They would have said, hey, Sam Bankman Fried, let's put him in charge of downtown. He's raised lots of money. That shouldn't be how you get a job in government.
And
Again,
isn't it also the
musical
effect
comedy.
of AI? I know Goldman Sachs did a report saying that 350 million workers will lose their jobs. The
Yes.
plan is to eliminate workers and labor. And in San Francisco, in fact, they want to get rid of public workers, replace them with AI. These companies,
Yeah. Well, the what is the benefit of AI is simply the most sociopathic of answers. We benefit this back in the 1900s. Um, I remember I wrote a paper up saying that all that had happened essentially in the 1900s was we made things go faster. Cars were invented in the 1800s, trains, but all we really did was make things go faster. You could get from point A to point B faster. You could get information faster. You could talk to somebody now rather than sending them a letter. Everything we could kill people faster. But in terms of invention, a lot of those things had already happened. Now, in the late 1900s and the early 2000s, it became about convenience. We can't do everything isn't necessarily faster, but it's significantly more convenient. And we, as Americans particularly, are willing to sacrifice, it turns out, almost anything in the name of convenience. We don't care about child slavery. We don't care about immigrants' rights. We don't even care about our own rights. As long as we can get what we want right now. Uh, there's a point, I'm sure you remember this, when cable was on and you could get things in the rest of the world. It was upon request. You could watch this movie or this television show or whatever upon request. In the United States, it was on demand. That is an important linguistic and psychological difference. We want what we want and we demand it now, and we don't care how we get it as a country. And that is now people are like, well, I'm not getting the things that I deserve somehow. I deserve to feel better than everybody else. Where's my natural benefit for being an American? And it's like, calm the hell down, focus on what you have earned, and that we all benefit from us all having more, more quality of life, more rights. If somebody else has rights, you don't lose any rights. There are all of these things that our culture has shed in favor of immediate convenience, and profit. And so, yeah, get rid of all of these jobs. And it's like, well, how do we pay for anything? How do your customers buy the things you sell if you don't have employees and everyone else doesn't have employees? Have you thought about it? Because it's not like you have to think way down the line for that. That's tomorrow, not in 50 years. But when people are just, here's an example. So you've got these people down in Hillsborough and wherever, and sociopaths. They don't like to be around people. They want to be alone and back off and live in their heads to a certain extent, creating things. And they may create something wonderful and amazing, but they really don't like to be around people. And so they've got their estate off to the side. They have their groceries delivered. They don't want to take a cab with a cab driver. They have a very isolated bubble life. Those people are now in charge of our culture, making that culture for us. So get rid of cabs, get rid of cab drivers, get rid of stores, get rid of employees. For them, the perfect life is to be able to sail through from place to place without encountering other humans. And they're imposing that, agoraphobia upon the rest of us. And it's terrifying and horrifying, and that we've allowed it because they give us some, conveniences.
Well, people are very angry at the political system. They're privatizing Medicare Advantage. They want to take away Medicare or 4 millions of people, 17 million
Hmm.
people. If you don't make money on Medicare, you're not going to you don't provide it. It seems like the system itself is self-destructing. And an example is this flood that went on in Texas. Has nothing to do with climate. It's just one of those things, which are happening more and more. And
Yeah.
at the same time, they're getting rid of meteorologists, they're getting rid of scientists. They want to destroy public education, which is part of the program of Project 2025. Where is this going to lead? Because it seems like people are basically being put against the wall more and more. They can't survive.
Well, the disillusion of the United States was inevitable. Also, when I was in college, I wrote a paper about that the United States would inevitably break up because of it's a big country, too many different cultures, not immigration cultures, but the South is a completely different culture than the Northeast. And also all countries, everything's going to go through a cycle. Um, and I feel like with and not just with Project 2025, but again the privatization and profitization. The government run by corporate heads cannot figure out how to make money off of Medicare, so they don't understand it. They, as rich people, have never had to worry about having health care. And they're like, how can we make money off this? And you just go, and that's what Doge was all about. I mean, besides, Elon Musk self-dealing and making sure that everybody who was investigating him lost a job. But also the basic idea of government efficiency. I talked to a reporter one time and they said, "Oh, you believe the government should be really big." And I said, "It should be big enough to do its job. It should also be small enough to do its job. It should be adequate to do its job." The disagreement is, what's the job? I think the job is free public education, free public health, public housing. It should be big enough to do the things that serve the taxpayers. But we again have people who feel like the job should be just big enough to make money. How can it make money? How can the Corporation of America, as Monty Python, the very big Corporation of America, said it, Meaning of Life, how does it make money? And we have to, like I was saying, there's a fundamental thing. Talking to someone yesterday, and he was talking about government efficiency, and he was a pro worker person, but see, he still had this government should be more businesslike. Absolutely not. That is such a fundamental and foundational, like hypnotism. It absolutely should not be like a business. Just like a for-profit business can't be run like a nonprofit. They're two different things, and we have to stop saying that as anti-corporatists. If you don't want corporate rule, stop saying it. It would be great. You
But
know?
isn't corporate media pushing that agenda? I mean, that
Oh hell yeah!
privatization is good. Selling off and privatizing things will make it more efficient. Um,
Right.
we're going to have more efficiency, and we don't need government oversight, like with Uber or like with Waymo, these autonomous vehicles, which will they've destroyed the taxi industry, but also millions of workers who drive trucks were going to lose their jobs. And this is Newsom, who vetoed twice a bill to require a driver if you have a truck over 10,000 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when you have Newsom was a business owner, and also he's got a weird history, but this, like I said, once you can get enough people to think that, their boss is their friend, you know, that business is fundamentally good, that businesses succeed if you think, and it's like, no, most businesses fail. Most for-profit businesses on Wall Street, they fail within a certain number of years, like 4 years, I think is the average. And that's, you know, in a best of times situation. That's just average. And I want my government to last longer than that. It is fundamentally wrong to want a business person to run a nonprofit, and government is a nonprofit. And we as the workers have to, it doesn't matter if they're pushing it all the time. They can lie to me every day. I have to not believe the lie. We as workers have to stop thinking they're our friends. We have to stop thinking that people who inherited a bunch of money are smart. They were lucky. People who succeeded in business are normally just lucky. What have they actually done? Don't believe the hype that they present, where they make it like this system works. I'm rich. You too could be rich. Probably not. Not just because of racism, sexism, transphobia, xenophobia, and all of that, but just they were just friggin' lucky. Right place, right time. If we work together, we can make things hopefully that benefit all of us, and we will see that benefit. They're not interested in working with us. They're at best interested in us working for them, and at worst us simply being customers.
And you have a situation today again with these floods that Trump has said he's going to send in all kinds of resources and helicopters and everything. But when there was a fire in California,
Hmm.
the South, he released the water
Yeah.
to the ground and said that he was going to solve the fire problem by releasing water. It seems to be an effort to crush California, to make California like Texas and Florida. When I heard that
Mm.
National Guard helicopters were being used to chase farm workers off the lands, I mean, the
Yeah.
people who produce our fruit and vegetables. It seems that this effort to crush the people of California, the economy of California, is putting very great stress, targeting the people of California directly. That they want a different regime, different system, and want to destroy California. Do you get that
Well,
feeling?
yes. I mean, it's very that part. I mean, the other thing about Trump is that when I say, we've got people who've never had to work, Trump has never even had to succeed. I saw a study once that said that if he had taken all the money that he had inherited from his parents, from his father, and put it in a savings account, he would be richer now than he is. That's how bad at business he is. He loses money. He's not good at business. And that has allowed him, also his great wealth has allowed him to be extraordinarily petty. He is not, I don't think he's not dedicated to traditional conservative values of the Republican Party. He's just interested in what did he do? He's interested in having attention. He doesn't like anybody in the room who he deems smarter than him, or that he is not benefiting from, or that is getting attention. And so, uh,
You think that's
you
the
know,
reason for the fight with Musk?
oh
Where
hell
Musk
yeah,
is now saying he wants a new party?
oh yeah, and he's also enough another. I inherited $300 million. Only thing Musk is good at. Musk has a talent. Um, he's a really good self promoter, better than Trump. He's a good self promoter, and he did see a pattern. He got into PayPal early, and he saw that online payment was going to be a thing, and he got into Tesla as an investment early. That's it. He has those two talents. He makes everybody think he's a genius by constantly saying crap and making predictions that will never come true. But he constantly sells himself, and he made two good investments. That but those two, uh, the fact that he was richer than Trump, I think really hurt Trump's brain a lot. But anyway, yeah. So those two egos were going to clash no matter what. Trump got what he wanted out of the deal. He got million, what, almost $300 million in promotion for the election, and he got somebody else to do some hard work of tearing down the government, and then get the hell out of my office. So there are a couple of nuts, but the idea, like I said, of what do these people want ultimately? What is the thing that they are driving towards? Is more than privatization of government. It is, what was it, Grover Norquist's idea of government should be so small you can drown it in a bathtub. I think they said that in the 80s. That
But
fundamental idea of wanting to have no government, of really having a corporate federal system where it's just corporations competing against corporations to a certain extent with no regulation, so you can end up with absolute monopoly in each industry. And like I said, we are our rights. The Constitution is an impediment. I mean, he's Trump, his control over the Supreme Court, and so Trump's interpretation of the Constitution is what we are also living in right now. He's got so many people in the Constitution who consider themselves originalists, when the people who wrote the Constitution, slave owning weirdos that they were, they'd kick the crap out of these people. They'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand why we have a separation of church and state. Why do we have a Senate and a House? And, why do we have three branches of government, not just one? They don't, those, well, they're idiots on the Supreme Court who don't understand their job. They may they may speak well, they've passed classes and they may teach, but they don't understand their job. If the garbage collectors showed up every day to your house to collect the garbage, and when they left, there was still garbage outside, and all they took was the valuable stuff, you wouldn't call them a successful garbage collector, you'd call them a thief, even though they're stealing your garbage. But that's all they're taking, is the stuff they can benefit from. That's what we have on the Supreme Court majority, are people who don't understand the fundamental part of their job. Instead, they're doing the part of their job that they and their friends benefit from. Um, when they passed the thing where basically Trump could declare anyone an enemy of the state, the president could declare somebody enemy of the state and have them assassinated. And I was like, wait a minute, that includes you, not me. That means that he could declare anybody on the Supreme Court an enemy of the state and have them executed. That's what they agreed to. What kind of idiot agrees to that? So that's why I say they're, the majority is idiots. I don't. So
I
what
mean,
hope
the
do
way
I
they
have for our
wanted,
democracy?
well, the ideology of techno-fascism, David
Hmm.
Sachs, Peter Thiel, Musk, Vance, who was, they had a Bennett for him at David Sachs' home in San
Yeah.
Francisco, and for Trump. It seems like these techno-fascists, they are running not only the country, they're running San Francisco, and
Hmm.
they're in charge, and they're using the technology, AI and all the technology, algorithms to spy on people to wherever they are and to control people. And now, with a fascist state, with an insurrection Supreme Court, insurrection Congress, I mean, the Johnson gave the gavel of Congress to Trump
Yeah.
recently to be in charge of Congress. This is the situation we're facing. Yet it seems in the history of the United States, even in San Francisco during the 30s, in 1934, this month, there was a general strike where the workers
Hmm.
the San Francisco for a union hiring hall, for the longshoremen to have
Right.
a union hiring hall. It seems like that kind of mass working class action really is the only thing that will actually slow down or even stop uh, these fascists from actually implementing their program, because they have a whole agenda to smash any kind of democratic process, unions, worker organizations. Everybody's a terrorist who they disagree with, as you were saying. I mean, it seems like it's a existential crisis for the people of this country, the people of the world.
Yeah. Well, I think that the most difficult thing with having an existential crisis is you kind of got to know who you are and what you want in the first place. And not enough Americans. This is why I'll tell people what was on the ballot last year was the Constitution. People focused on the wrong damn thing. People focused on all of these issues without going, oh, wait, this election is about whether I not get to have a vote again in the future. You know, this vote that they either stepped out, they said, oh, I don't want to vote at all because it's two parties. They're the same party. They're not the two damn parties. That is the easiest answer to say. They are both capitalist parties. And I mean, I have this argue all the time. They're both capitalist parties, but one of them has a social democratic progressive wing, and the other one has a Nazi wing. And if you can't tell the difference, you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to politics. If you can equate, Ocasio-Cortez with any of the freaking Nazis in the Republican Party and say, yeah, they're about the same, you would need to go and read something, and you should shut the hell up. Because you don't know. Yes, they're capitalists, but it's more than that. And as a leftist, I get into this argument all the time with people who are always trying to be more leftist than thou. And I'm like, Vladimir Lenin said that the Bolsheviks had to take part in the Duma before the revolution. The Black Panther Party ran for office. You're not more leftist than them. So stop saying that by not participating, politics will leave you alone, because it won't. You can do both. You can operate above and below ground, but do not sacrifice all of the immigrants' rights to make yourself feel better. You know, all of
Well,
those families who are being picked up off the streets and taken away and forced to leave the country and shipped away, and families being broken up because of what? Because you didn't like Kamala Harris's policies when she was DA of San Francisco. I didn't either. I thought she was an awful DA, but she's no freaking Donald Trump. And there is a difference. The Democrats have a lot of problems, but they're not Nazis.
but at the same time, we have a political vacuum in this country. For
Yeah.
example, for example, the budget crisis.
Hmm.
Redmond was saying actually on a radio interview, if they take away the money from California, why don't we just make the billionaires who have the money pay for that that's being taken away?
Hmm.
It
Yeah,
seems
why
like
don't, or if they're going to stop, if the federal government is, and see, this is the thing people always forget. Also forget. Remember, the Republicans were the party of states' rights. They even back during the Civil War, it was all they always said this is all about states' rights. And so, if it's all about states' rights, then you have a federal system. Our system is supposed to be a balance between national government and states' rights. If they no longer want to support the states, that means our federal income tax should be withheld by the state to provide for all of the things that we are no longer getting. If California decides to withhold its federal income tax, it goes to state tax, we can pay for the schools. Right now, we're supporting Mississippi. You know, we're supporting Alabama. We're supporting Florida. We're supporting all of these other states because our state is so rich. But is that really the system we want, where states are fighting against each other so much? But that's what we could end up with.
but the issue then in California, for example, none of the Democrats in California, all these Democrats in San Francisco and throughout the state, none of them are saying, well, let's make the capitalists, the billionaires, pay for what is being taken away from California. Not one that I know about
Yeah.
has
Well, there
said,
was a,
they have a super majority in the legislature, for example.
yeah,
Our unions could say, well, why don't we pass legislation to tax the billionaires, the capitalists, and have a capital tax on the 80 billionaires, 170 billionaires in California? Make
yeah.
them pay. Not a word.
Well,
Not a
that's one of
word.
one of the most frustrating things is this idea that, well, if you, I- it's like having a dog that bites you, and then the dog bites you and you go, "Mm, well, I shouldn't punish it in any way, because if I do that it'll get mad and it'll bite me more, but then it bites you more anyway." And then you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't work into training, I shouldn't really try to figure out how to make it not bite me, I should just leave it alone so it bites you more, because you're training it to bite you. you know You should be dealing with it, figure out what's making the dog unhappy, try to make it so that it's not biting you. And we're doing the same thing with billionaires. We are training them to bite us by not giving them any kind of negative reinforcement, and all on the fear that if we don't allow them to rip our throat out, they'll move to Texas, you know? And it's like, let them move to Texas. If the price to pay is that we have to become Texas to keep them here eating our faces, that's not worth it. I'd much rather have fewer billionaires in California if we're not benefiting from their being here anyway. We don't benefit from their taxes. We don't benefit from them providing anything. They're busy getting rid of jobs. Let them do that somewhere else. We have to focus on what is the purpose of government. And the purpose of a government in a democratic republic is to provide services and livability for the populace in general. And instead, we're so focused on keeping billionaires happy, when what we should be doing is keeping billionaires marinated so that we can eat them. You know, that's it. Not just, oh my goodness, they're going to move. And then they move anyway. All of those tax breaks that went to the banks in San Francisco, they moved. All the tax breaks that Tesla got, all the tax breaks that these companies, when Twitter, back when it was Twitter, got their tax breaks to be in San Francisco, and it's like, oh, it's 10 years of reduced or no taxes. Everybody who was thinking for a moment would know that when 9.5 years was up, Twitter was going to say, we want to renew this deal or we're going to move. Obviously, they were going to do that. And the mayor at that time, for some reason, just not the shiniest ball in the batch, didn't get that he was being so easily outmaneuvered. Ugh. It's like figuring out what your job is. I know what my job is, you know, and I do it to the best of my ability. And it's not about being rich. It's not about getting all the money I could to as an artist. It's about trying to tell the stories that the community that I think can benefit the community. And that's what the Mime Troupe has always done. It's like trying to take these issues and tell them in a way like this show. Disruption deals with a lot of stuff. We deal with the corporatization of San Francisco and Silicon Valley invasion. We deal with the immigrants being snatched up off the streets and the fear that somebody has in their everyday life. That, as I was telling one person, if you have a friend who is an immigrant, and whether they have a green card, whether they're working their way to citizenship, whether they married into this country, whatever, the last time you saw them may be the last time you see them. It doesn't matter if they're the nicest neighbor. It doesn't matter if they make cookies for the kids at school. Whatever that situation, they're living in such fear now. There are people who have come to the Mime Troupe show and said that they have friends who would love to come, but they're afraid of leaving their houses. That's the city we live in. You know, that's like the country, the Bay Area, a place where people who are law abiding and we benefit from them being here are scared of leaving their homes for fear they won't see their family again because the government will kidnap them. And they followed all the rules. So trying to deal with all of those different issues about factories closing down, about immigration, about a government that is increasingly naked in its oppression, but at the same time to tell these stories in a way that the audience can feel challenged enough and riled up enough, but not so depressed they just kill themselves. And that's always the trick with the Mime Troupe, is because they are musical comedies. I'm going to write a farce, and I've got to, in all of this oppression, find a way to attack the system, uh, encourage the audience, rile them up, but also not lie to them. You know,
And
not make them feel like, hey, things will work out.
well, the right wing has the fascists have said we've got to stop wokeism.
Yeah.
Got to stop
And
wokeism.
wokeism. And what is wokeism? The idea that you understand history. That
That's the
the
radical
that
thing. Well, the
that is
American
all.
history, very radical
Americans
history.
Americans hate history. We degrade it. We say it's not important. That was yesterday, that was then, and this is now. But all you are in your life, in your culture, whatever it is, you are simply a result of history. Whatever you have is a result of history. There is no now, and the future is imagined. Now, right now, when I said now, that is now history. The future is just an imaginary thing that hopefully we'll get to. Everything is history. So anybody that says they don't understand history means they don't understand who they are, where they came from. They don't understand their family. They don't understand what they have, and they don't understand the potential that they could have for the future, or a country could have for the future. History and psychology are the only things that should be mandatory because they involve everything else. Um, and so trying to tell people how we got to where we are is increasingly difficult when we have college students who are high school students who haven't even taken civics, or the civics was like a quick course over here that they're forced to take. I was watching YouTube. They're starting to run a lot of the old Schoolhouse Rock things, and people are like, "Oh my God, this was for children." you know that they're talking about these numbers and talking about words and definitions and history and all of that, and there's a lot of propaganda in the history of Schoolhouse Rock. By no means is it even close to perfect, but the idea of I'm just a bill and I'm only a bill, that modern Americans, that's freaking astrophysics to them, as opposed to it just being, yeah, this is how this works, and
And
children used to know this.
the fear that they have about wokeism, people waking up, the 60s for them was a terrible time
Yes.
because people were waking up. Do you see people waking up in this country? Because if people do wake up to the reality of the situation, we're going to have millions
Hmm.
of people in the street. Millions
Right.
of people are going to rise up. I mean, the threat of the imposition, the implementation of a fascist program when people are afraid to go out of their homes, that is a
Yeah.
reality for millions of people in the United States. When people wake
Right.
up to the need to fight that and to mobilize against that, that could bring a tidal wave of millions and tens of millions of people out. And people are out on against the king at the
Yeah.
Tesla places, against
Yeah.
oligarchy and fascism. There seems to be a rising tide of people waking up that we've got to stop this fascist regime.
Well, there are, I mean, I understand, uh, from my perspective, as a person of color, that there are certain things in every culture that are givens. And I would say for the United States, uh, there are these essential things, like the English have their very Englishness, the very idea that their Englishness is so important and people are taking their Englishness, which is how they ended up with Brexit. And it wrecking their economy and them struggling ever since because they were held on to, if there was one thing that they thought they had that made them superior, that made them special in the universe, was their Englishness. And they decided that all of the different economic the winds and boulders that were coming at them, which were really because of capitalism, was because their Englishness was under threat. And so they had to do everything they did to protect their Englishness, and they got talked into a big con. In the United States, there are two things I would say that are primarily a burden to the country. One is whiteness. There's a central idea that whiteness is this thing that if you could take everything else from someone, but they still have a sense, if it's a white person, they have been taught from birth that there's something essentially different, special, and neat about whiteness. And so that they can end up with thinking that, the primary beneficiary of affirmative action has always been white women, but it's projected to the country as darkies, you know and the problem, the white jobs are being taken, and that this idea that I may lose everything else, I may be living on a shack on the side of the road, but at least some black welfare queen isn't is doesn't have can't make rent, and that makes me feel good. That essential idea of whiteness is, and not wanting it to, like, so a melting pot idea was just like this threat. The 60s idea that we are all kind of like equal and the same, and it should be a true meritocracy that takes into consideration a racist and sexist oppressive past, that essential idea, a meritocracy that takes into consideration racism and sexism as a hindrance to that. And so we have to have some kind of affirmative action to balance that out, is such a threat. The other thing is maleness. What does it mean to be a male human being? Men are, we don't have to carry around heavy things as much as we used to because we have machines. We don't have to defend against bears and lions. We can kill things at a distance with a button. So, how you define maleness is tearing this country apart also. Guys that think, no, well, we've got to get rid of these women in these jobs. They only have jobs because we're trying to go for affirmative action. And everybody else, it should just be white men, just white men, because they're trying to get this definition for themselves. It's a psychological turmoil. And I understand it, because when you've been raised to think you're special, and you get to a point where anything you do can actually be done by somebody of equal talent, where's your specialness? And your specialness should be what you create, what you do. But if you think that you have some inherent specialness and it's threatened, you go, wait a minute, what is that? People go, well, we're woke. This is awakening, an awakening, which is a good thing, a general awakening to how we live in history and how all of this oppression shapes the society we live in. And someone goes, well, don't wake up. I do not want to be awake to that. I want to think I deserve this. I want to think that I worked for every penny I got. I want to believe that I worked. I absolutely deserve every preference that I had gotten because I'm special. And they're not, but they're not going to accept that. So that's another
Isn't
thing,
that
tearing
isn't
apart the
that the
country.
case with the ideology of Zionism, that the Jews are
Every
special?
Yeah, I mean, well, everything. There's whether it's Russia or whether it's, Myanmar. I mean, every country, nationalism, the patriotism is the idea that your country is special because you were born there. Um, every country has its sense of specialness and special history, special mission in history. What is our country has a purpose, or humanity has a purpose. Humanity doesn't have a purpose. We're just mainly naked primates who have we lost our fur, we put on clothes, and we think that we know things, but we're really very basic fundamental animals. Countries don't have special purposes. Cultures don't have special purposes. You're lucky if you stumble upon things that benefit other people, but you should strive for that. But there's nobody is inherently better, and I mean, religion also makes people think that they are somehow chosen by their God. Normally, it's a God, not gods. Um, chosen by their creator, that they are chosen. Evangelicals thinking they are chosen. Um, and that's
But
your relationship between you and the universe, but it should have nothing to do with anything else or anybody else.
well, Christian fundamentalism, part of the remaking of America from the point of view of fascists, is to bring Christian ideology into the schools and
Yeah,
Christian fundamentalism. And there's a rise of fundamentalism all over the world. Uh,
yeah. And I actually feel like, see, I have my own podcast YouTube channel where I talk about a lot of stuff. But I feel like one of the and I'm not sure what the solution is to this, but climate change is an actual existential crisis in that it has to do with existence. People think existential crisis is like, oh, I don't know, should I get a martini or brandy? Ooh, how do I define myself? No, an existential crisis is really existence. And I feel like with climate change, we had a choice to either address it or ignore it or pray about it. And we chose the easy two, ignore it or pray about it, rather than deal with it. And so as it gets worse and worse, people are leaning more and more into, if a scientist tells me the world is going to end, do I trust the scientist or do I trust some dick on the internet who says, don't worry about it? I'm going to do my own research, kind of. So you get the people who are just going to do their own research. and believe anybody who's going to tell them what they want to hear rather than doing the hard work of dealing with climate change, or they're going to leave it up to Jesus and pray to Jesus. The tornadoes get worse, hurricanes get worse, flooding happens. It's freezing one day and it's burning up the next, and we don't have crops and we don't have enough food, and bees are dying off and all of this stuff. Well, let me just pray about that. But I'm going to get into my SUV when I live in a city where my SUV has never even seen dirt. It's not a sports utility vehicle. It's a massive penis. It's like all of these things. It's like, I'm going to, rather than changing my consumption, rather than changing my cultural diet, rather than getting rid of some of my conveniences, I will simply go to church and pray that things get better. I will check some internet person who tells me I shouldn't have to worry about it, but I'm not going to inconvenience myself in any way. I will not take the bus. I will not walk, even though the store is a block away, and I'll buy the biggest damn car I can, knowing that every time you start your car, you're making the world a worse place. That's just fact. That is an undeniable fact. Doesn't matter if you just run it to keep the battery going. You're making the world a little worse. So there are so many things you could do to just cut back on that stuff. Really question what you need, question all of this stuff. But it is easier to let go and let God. So the worse things get economically, and which in terms of the climate, the worse things get environmentally, the worse they will get economically, the worse everything will get. The more people will become more and more fanatically religious.
So you're pretty pessimistic then.
I would say I've always been I always call myself a optimistic realist. Um, well, but when I was a kid, my father, we talked about philosophy because that's what we did in my house. And my father said that he felt like the purpose of humans was to be kind of the guardians, not guardians, gardeners of the universe. Our job is to make things better, to help things. And as a child, I said, no, it's not. We don't have a job. We're just another organism. And our only thing that we can hope for is that we evolve quick enough to not destroy ourselves. And people say, oh, we can't destroy the planet. It's a big rock. Absolutely right. You can't destroy the planet, but we can kill ourselves. We can make the planet inhospitable. And the mitigation of that has been woefully inadequate. I remember talking to a guy one time, and he was a grown up, and he said, well, I don't really see the problem with climate change. I mean, we start our cars and stuff and all of that, but we're not making anything that doesn't exist in nature. And unfortunately, I had to rely on him in that moment. I was getting ready to walk on stage to do a performance, so I didn't have time for a conversation. But to say, do you have grandchildren? If you have grandchildren, would you put your grandchildren in your car, put it in the garage, close the garage, and start up the engine? And just leave them in there? No, even though nothing the car is making is false, it's going to kill them. And that's what we're doing. It's not like a big scientific weird thing. There's just only so much of this that we have, and we're ruining it. And like I said, whether or not we survive is not, oh, we've got to get out to space. Why? Why would we
I
go to
think the
Mars
plan
if
of
we
these people to go to Mars is to escape what's happening here.
right, and Mars is like living in hell. Mars is impossible. The only thing that I think about any kind of Mars project is that a part of me hopes Elon Musk goes to Mars, because it's a horrible place. Everything about it is trying to kill you, because we have been made to live on this planet, not on any other planet. We don't benefit. Our children don't benefit. Our grandchildren, none of our progeny benefit from starting a hellscape on Mars. But they keep talking about it, and they keep talking about it to distract us from the fact that they're not doing enough to make this planet into a livable Earth. So I wouldn't say I'm pessimistic. I would just say I'm still realistic. We have a chance for some of us to manage to, for some version of humanity to survive. But yeah, things happen. more of a fatalist. At some point there aren't going to be people, and when that time happens in the future, is up for debate.
And how can people get involved with the mime troupe? You're in a struggle for survival as other arts organizations are. Maybe you can talk about that because the closure of theaters, cultural arts, the destruction of a national endowment, and the funding for art is really a cataclysmic situation for many art organizations.
Yeah, it's been death. We've lost, California Shakespeare Festival died, Cutting Ball Theater died, 42nd Street Moon died. A lot of the, yeah, and another major theater company is probably going to announce very soon that it's gonna die. I just know this. That the culture war is part of the overall fascism. Dictators hate real culture. They don't want something, they want something they can absolutely control. It's like in Nazi Germany when they had artists that worked for the Nazis, but then they would have the degenerative arts exhibits, where they would have Jewish and Slavic and other what they considered subhuman people in their art. But those were the museums and exhibitions that everybody went to because the art was better. The art was freer. The art was telling a story about that person and their interaction with the world rather than just what the sculpture, that idealized sculpture that Hitler wanted them to make or something. So in general, yeah, that's why when you look at Roman history, we get a lot of busts of emperors. You know, we get a lot of busts of very rich people, but what you don't see is a lot of stuff about common folks just kind of living their lives. We know it existed because there is some. You will see some, like as they uncover stuff in Herculaneum in Pompeii, they'll say, "Oh, this is an average person just going to the store."
They built the
That were
Colosseum, they built the pyramids, they built everything
right.
in that period.
I mean, in some way, the Egyptians had much more art depicting common people because they see these huge hieroglyphs and they're just common people, farmers doing stuff, people fishing, doing different things. By the time we get to the Romans, not so much. Um, that dictatorial sense of absolute control, which is the same way it is in a corporation. You can't. Somebody's just not going to be able to go downstairs and do a mural because the workers wanted it. The CEO has to sign off on it. So not funding the arts is because the arts are always going to be critical of oppression. That's what art is. You have to all art. Well, it's not always that. Art is either upholds the status quo or challenges the status quo. Them's your options. That's it. Everything else is a nothing. And most of the time, the stuff that upholds the status quo just isn't very interesting. So, dictatorial power wants to get rid of that. They want to kill the jester. They want to make sure that whether it comes to racism, sexism, or whatever, there is no alternate version. It's all Fox News. So these theaters that have been losing their funding, also a lot of foundations are afraid right now of funding any organization that does challenge the status quo. Family funds who are just like, they don't want to lose their nonprofit status by giving money or helping a theater just produce a show. Um, the unions are scared. I remember years ago, Mime Troupe did a very pro-union show, and I talked to you about it. We were trying to get union involvement in producing it nationwide, and they were like, "No," because they're like, "Oh, it's too whatever, too leftist. We just want people to come in and sing." And it's like, "Hey, uh, it's art and it's pro-union." But still too scary. Um, People back off of politics, and the NEA getting the mandate that things that are going to be funded have to prove that they are somehow patriotic, which is totally subjective. I know a bunch of people who worked at the NEA for decades, and they just all quit recently because they didn't want to be policed like that, and they didn't want to have to police the artists that they were giving money to. So, and corporations, as the idea, and this is really one of those, you snatch the veil off kind of things. All these corporations that were backing theaters and backing arts funding for festivals and for individual artists. But then when it was like, oh, you don't get as much of a tax break for that, let's not do it anymore. Because they weren't doing it because they supported the arts. They weren't doing it because they wanted to hear diverse voices. They're doing it for the tax break. That's how you judge, in my opinion, somebody who says, "Well, I'm a mentor, or I'm a sponsor, or I'm a patron." Do they give more than their accountant says is best for their tax break? Their patronage is just that extra dollar they put on top of how from the money they benefit from giving. Somebody who just gives you money, an anonymous donation and they don't get a tax break, that's a patron. Somebody who says, well, even if the person says my accountant says I should give you $20,000, that's what's best for them. They're not a patron. They're somebody with money who's trying to get a tax break. I mean, we'll take the money, but let's not hold them up on and put them up on a pedestal as a great person. We need, and that's why public funded art, what our tax dollars go to, should be another super important thing for us. This is the world we live in. Art is all around us. The sidewalks, the buildings, everything is that we make is art. It's not just the plays, it's not just the films, it's the statues that you see in the streets, it's the architecture that you see when you go downtown, it's the design of a car. That's all art. We're swimming in so much art that we don't see it. And so we don't see it. And then when the government says we're going to shut down this art school, we're going to get rid of this, we're going to get rid of, this drama school. And it's like, well, that's where the people who make the movies come from. So now you're not going to have that. Oh, we'll just do that with AI. Even the people who are designing that are artists at some stage. And so for the Mime Troupe, we're a professional union theater company. And we do shows for free. But funding it has always been a thing since we don't take corporate dough. So we pass the hat after the show. We have some major donors who have helped us out a great deal. But our shows are still much less expensive to do than most plays for a professional theater. But when somebody comes and sees a Mime Troupe show and they put $1 in the hat, I totally understand if that is all they can afford. But they should know that the show cost 350,000 of those to do. Our summer this year, we raised about 250,000, and that's for half a season. And that's with people like I wrote the show, I'm in the show, I directed the show. I did not take the fee for directing because the company couldn't afford it. You know, we didn't hire a set designer because the company couldn't afford it. So we put our costs down as low as we could. We have 4 people in the play because we couldn't afford a fifth. 3 musicians because we couldn't afford 4. All of these different things that we do to try to bring our costs down as low as possible, but still give the audience the best experience and provide the finances that our artists need to live. But that's why we look at ourselves as we are a people's theater of by and for the people, but we also need the support of the people.
And that's what people should do. They should contribute to you to keep it going. And to
Yeah. I mean, we have different levels of giving and go to our website and become annual sponsors and become an ally. And yeah, we don't do, it's not like you're going to get a sponsor, become a member of a theater and see 6 different shows in a year, but you could come and see the same one 6 times and bring new people. Um, you know, but it's also like giving money, not just to a theater company, but we see ourselves as an organizing body also. We do shows, we work with other organizations, nonprofits. People set up tables so that they can uh, reach our audience in different ways, whether it's through leafleting, inviting them to their events, all of these different things. It's kind of a little gathering of the tribe that goes on, and that's also what people are sponsoring. The opportunity, as I said, and theater audience is a self-selecting community. And at the very least, you go and you sit there and you go, well, I can't be crazy because look at all these other people who also think this is fascism. who also think this is wrong, who also don't want to lose their freedom. And to see us up there saying things in a way that it's not, we're not censoring ourselves. Another reason to don't take corporate dough, because once you do, even if the corporation doesn't say you should be quiet, you'll self-censor, because they'll go, oh, if we say this about bankers, maybe we won't get that money next year. We should tamp that down. The bankers don't even have to say it.
Well, in your
Um,
play, you do deal with Waymo, and I was
oh
surprised.
hell yeah. Well, I mean, but that's news. It's just like everything else. People are setting fire to Waymos, and specifically because they see them as spy things, because they are. They do. This is something that came up during the LA insurrection occupation, really. The LA occupation, that the reason they were setting fire to Waymos was because Google has a deal with the police, and they use all of those cameras, and then the police can ask for that footage, and then they use the facial recognition to figure out who was there. It's not like it's a conspiracy theory, it's just what happens. So uh so all of these different things that we bring up, like I put a line in the show where they specifically say that the mayor's laid off 1,000 civil servants, and I was like, oh, and I'm like, no, that's from the newspaper. They fired 1,000 civil servants right away. They just decided that these people didn't matter, and that whatever they were doing. And that's why I talk about the fire department in the show. Because when people say, if when Elon Musk said, I'm going to call all of these people in these different things, and if they can't say what they've done in the last 2 weeks, I'm going to fire them. And I talked to people who were like, well, that's reasonable. And I was like, no, it's not. And they were saying, no, no, no. But if somebody hasn't done their job in 2 weeks, then they maybe we should cut them. And it's like, you don't believe that. And they're like, yes, I do. And I said, firefighters. If a firefighter hasn't done their firefighting job in 2 weeks, do you think we should get rid of them? And they're like, oh no. And I was like, then shut the hell up. All of these things. FEMA, if there hasn't been an emergency, you fire FEMA? No. Oh, well, Social Security seems to be running fine. All of these different things. You don't want to deal with the emergency after it's happened. You need the bureaucracy to keep things going to avoid problems, um, and to deal with them, nip them in the bud. So yeah, so I put that in the show. The idea of, well, why don't you get rid of the fire department? And why don't you why don't you sell off the naming rights of the dome of City Hall if it's all about making money?
Well, in Texas and Florida this year with the hurricanes, they're going to find out what it
Yes,
is.
they will.
They will
And
find out.
the rush towards privatization is a rush towards the 1800s, when fire departments were run just by people, um, until somebody realized, oh, well, maybe if we use taxes. Before that, you didn't have the right insurance, or they didn't get to your house in time. There was a mime trooper who showed up in the 70s, and he had driven all the way from Kentucky, I think it was. And when he got here, he was working with the company, and then one day, the oil on his car caught fire, and his car was burning in the street. And the fire department showed up, and he was trying to stop them. He was out in the street saying, no, 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 don't do it. Because he thought he had to pay for that. Because where he came from, he did. In Kentucky, if your fire department showed up to put out a fire, you had to pay them. And it's like, that's not where the world, that's not a civilization, you know? That's what people would call dog eat dog, even though that's a lie, because if dogs are eating dogs, something's horribly wrong. Dogs normally work together. We're not as good as them when it comes to that. Um, you have to think about what is the goal of the society you live in. And if the goal is to make rich people richer, then this is what we want. If the goal is to have the greatest good for the greatest number, that's something that is an everyday work towards a thing. And it includes, the greatest number includes people you don't like, people you don't want to think about, people that you hope you will never be, but it is still the greatest number. And it doesn't, and the greatest good for the greatest number doesn't mean you oppress the minority. They will benefit from it too. But instead of a good tide raises all boats situation, we've got rich people in submarines. They don't care what happens up there. It could be a storm. They're going to be fine. Anyway, musical comedy.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Michael.
Thanks for the talk, Steve.
People